You're being replaced. The words still echo in Maya Ellison's head as the elevator climbs toward the 32nd floor of Meridian National Bank, the same institution she just turned into its most profitable year in a decade. She knows what's waiting above. A board of men who never believed she belonged there. The same men who smiled in her face while planning her removal behind closed doors. Today they'll tell her it's about culture, about fit, about tradition. But Maya didn't come here to beg for her job. She came to end theirs. As the elevator rises, her reflection stares back from the mirror-polished doors, steady, unflinching. Every step of her career has prepared her for this moment. Every slight, every coded comment, every barrier disguised as policy, all of it ends today. The chime sounds. The doors slide open. A marble plaque reads, Dr. Maya Ellison, Chief Executive Officer. 90 seconds from the lobby to the boardroom. 90 seconds until the men who built this empire learn the hard way. You can't erase a woman who owns the company. The elevator doors part again on the 32nd floor, opening directly into the hushed corridor of the executive suite. Conversations that had hummed in the air die abruptly, replaced by an uneasy silence that seems to stretch across the glass and mahogany. Through the towering windows, New York's skyline sprawls outward in endless steel and stone, a panorama of ambition and possibility. But inside, the atmosphere is tight, suffocating, and charged with hostility. At the head of the boardroom table sits Edward Whitmore, the silver-haired chairman whose family has controlled the bank's influence for 3 generations. His presence is theatrical, his authority rehearsed. As Maya steps forward, he doesn't bother to disguise the disdain in his expression. His words cut into the silence with the precision of a blade. You don't belong in our boardroom. The phrase lingers, heavy with implication. It is more than a professional dismissal. It is a declaration of exclusion, a reminder that this confrontation is not about strategy, numbers, or corporate governance. It is about who is deemed worthy of power and who is not. Maya absorbs the words without flinching. The slightest curve of a smile crosses her lips, faint enough to unsettle, deliberate enough to sting. It is the kind of smile that unsettles powerful men because it is unreadable. Neither submission nor anger, but something they cannot categorize or control. She crosses the room with measured steps, the rhythm of her heels striking against the polished wood floor. At the head of the mahogany table, the seat that marks leadership, she lowers herself gracefully, her posture straight, her gaze steady. She sits not as someone diminished, but as someone who carries knowledge invisible to the rest of the room. Knowledge that could undo everything they believe is secure. The silence holds for a beat longer, thick with tension, before the board members resume their positions around the table. But the statement has already shifted the ground beneath them. The line has been drawn, and the confrontation has begun. The boardroom feels less like a place of business than a private club, cloaked in dark wood paneling and the watchful eyes of stern-faced founders captured in oil portraits. Their gazes follow Maya as she settles into her chair, portraits of men who symbolize the legacy her very presence now threatens. She opens her leather briefcase with deliberate calm and removes a sleek tablet. With a swipe, charts and figures illuminate the large screen mounted to the wall. Her voice is steady, precise, and professional. You'll be pleased to know, she begins, that we have exceeded quarterly projections by 18%. Customer satisfaction is at a 20-year high, and our community lending initiatives have generated not only goodwill, but also unexpected profit streams. For a brief moment, the numbers hang in the air, irrefutable in their success. But instead of acknowledgement, she is met with silence. Bradley Kent, the chief financial officer, glances at the Rolex on his wrist as though her report were an interruption rather than the reason for the meeting. The gesture is pointed, calculated, a silent reminder that, in his mind, her time holds less value. Across the table, Alan Pierce, the director of risk management, shuffles his papers noisily, as if absorbed in something more important than the CEO's words. When he finally speaks, his tone is skeptical, dismissive. Those numbers are interesting, Pierce says, not looking up, though I wonder about sustainability. His words drip with suspicion, as if achievement under Maya's leadership could not possibly be genuine. Whitmore leans back in his chair, studying her with the cold patience of a predator assessing its prey. His voice emerges with practiced authority, carrying the weight of generations behind it. Success is about more than numbers, Dr. Ellison. It's about fit, about culture, about understanding the values that built this institution. The words hang in the room like smoke, heavy, suffocating, and coded. Maya recognizes them instantly. She has heard these phrases her entire career. Fit, culture, values. They are not compliments. They are weapons, sharpened and disguised as courtesy. They mean one thing: you are not one of us, and you never will be. She does not answer immediately. Instead, she places her tablet down gently on the polished wood, folds her hands, and meets Whitmore's gaze with quiet defiance. Inside, she knows this meeting is no longer about financial performance. It is about power, identity, and who is allowed to claim a seat at this table. Maya lets the silence stretch, neither bowing her head nor rushing to respond. Instead, she reaches for her phone, sliding her finger across the screen with the kind of ease that betrays practice. A discreet red icon glows to life. The voice recorder is running. She makes a careful note in her leather-bound notebook. Date, time, location. Every detail will matter later. Her movements are smooth, economical, almost invisible to anyone not paying attention. But she is paying attention. She has trained herself to anticipate these moments, to document them with the precision of an auditor and the foresight of a strategist. 6 months of patient record-keeping have brought her here, to this precise inflection point. She looks up, her expression calm, and allows her voice to flow with a silk-like steadiness. "I'm curious," she says, "about these values you're so invested in. Could you elaborate on what makes someone a good cultural fit for Meridian National?" The question lands like a stone dropped into still water, its ripples visible on every face around the table. Kent shifts in his chair, his fingers drumming against the glossy wood. Pierce finally looks up from his papers, his eyes narrowing as if she had asked something forbidden. Whitmore's lips curl into a smile that does not reach his eyes. The room changes. Energy bends. What moments ago felt like casual dismissal now feels like something heavier, more deliberate. They sense the trap but cannot name it. What they don't know is that her question is no trap at all. It is documentation. Their answers, their tones, their silences will serve as evidence far more damning than any accusation she could level herself. What they also don't know is that Maya has been patient. Her silence has never been consent. Her composure has never been weakness. It has been strategy. And now the strategy is beginning to surface. The uneasy quiet lingers, broken only by the soft hum of the city outside the glass walls. Then, with a movement both casual and deliberate, Bradley Kent slides a manila folder across the table toward her. The scrape of cardboard on polished wood echoes in the charged stillness. "We've received some concerns about your leadership approach," he says smoothly, as though he were offering a routine administrative update rather than delivering an accusation. Maya places her hand on the folder and opens it with measured calm. Inside are printed sheets on company letterhead, neatly stacked and clipped. Her eyes skim the pages with practiced efficiency. The words blur together, a familiar refrain she has read before under different guises. "Too aggressive in meetings, doesn't collaborate well with established team members, brings politics into business decisions." Each line is an echo of a tired script, the corporate vocabulary of discrimination dressed in the clothing of performance concerns. Her pulse quickens, but her face remains a mask of composure. She has heard these indictments whispered in conference rooms, lodged in performance reviews, spun into narratives of deficiency whenever her competence proved too undeniable to ignore. "These are interesting," she says at last, closing the folder with deliberate calm. Her voice is low but steady, her tone betraying nothing. "Anonymous feedback is always challenging to address. Could you provide specific examples so that I can understand how to improve?" For the first time since the meeting began, Alan Pierce leans forward, his papers forgotten, his eyes alight with something resembling triumph. "Well," he begins, his voice dripping with false reason, "there's the diversity hiring initiative you implemented without board approval. Some people feel it's a divisive, focusing on race rather than qualifications." The accusation lands in the air like a slap, sharp and designed to sting. Yet Maya does not flinch. Instead, she allows a moment of silence to stretch thin across the room, letting the weight of their words reveal itself for what it is. Not critique, but coded resistance. Maya rests her fingertips lightly on the closed folder, her expression composed. Her gaze sweeps the table once, taking in the faces of men who expect her to shrink, to defend, to apologize. Instead, she straightens in her chair, her voice calm but edged with steel. "You mean the initiative," she says evenly, "that expanded our candidate pool by 40%? The same initiative that brought us graduates from Harvard, Wharton, and Stanford? The same program that correlates directly with our improved performance metrics?" The silence that follows is sharp, every syllable of her response cutting against the narrative they tried to spin. Kent's jaw tightens, his eyes flickering with irritation. He doesn't bother to respond. Pierce looks down at his notes again, suddenly less eager to press the point. Around the room, the dismissive certainty that had colored the board's posture begins to fray at the edges. But Edward Whitmore, still leaning back in his chair like a man who believes the building itself bends to his will, waves a hand dismissively. His smile is cold, paternal, and calculated. "It's not about resumes, Dr. Ellison," he says. "It's about whether someone truly understands our culture, whether they fit with the families who banked with us for generations." The word families lingers in the air, heavy with implication. Everyone in the room knows what he means. It isn't about tradition. It isn't about excellence. It is about exclusion dressed in velvet language. Maya's lips curve into the faintest suggestion of a smile, though her eyes remain hard. She doesn't challenge him yet. She doesn't need to. Every phrase they utter, every euphemism they lean on, is already being preserved. Her phone glowing quietly in her lap, the recorder capturing it all. Segment 7. Social messaging and the written record. The air in the boardroom grows heavier, each exchange layering onto the last. Bradley Kent leans forward again, this time abandoning the veneer of politeness. His tone is clipped, impatient, as though eager to deliver the next blow. "The board feels," he says, "that some of your decisions prioritize social messaging over sound banking principles." The phrase hangs in the room like an accusation, deliberate and sharp. To Kent, it sounds official, corporate, safe. But to Maya, it is nothing more than a mask, an attempt to reduce her insistence on equity and fairness to political posturing. She recognizes the tactic instantly. It is the same refrain she has heard in conference calls, in private conversations, in whispered dismissals, that any acknowledgement of systemic inequality is somehow a distraction from real business. Maya lowers her gaze just enough to glance at her phone. The recorder's red icon glows steadily. She picks up her pen and writes in her notebook with practiced calm. 3:47 p.m. Social messaging. Kent. Each word is deliberate, each stroke of the pen precise. Evidence, documentation, truth captured in ink. She looks up, her expression serene, her voice smooth as glass. "I'd like to understand what sound banking principles I violated," she says. "Our loan default rates are the lowest in 5 years. Customer retention has risen 23%. We've expanded successfully into 3 new markets. Which principle exactly concerns you?" Silence falls thick and suffocating. Kent shifts uncomfortably, but he doesn't answer. Pierce stares at his papers without reading. Whitmore's eyes fix on her, his gaze hard and unblinking, as though sheer force of will could bend reality to his version of events. Maya waits, still and composed, letting the silence expose what words cannot. That their objections are not about principles at all. They are about power, about control, about preserving a tradition that has always worked in their favor. Segment 8, Termination and the NDA. The silence holds just long enough to feel like surrender, but Edward Whitmore breaks it with a deliberate movement. He pushes his chair back and rises slowly, commanding the room as if he were presiding over a courtroom. At 62, he carries himself like a man who has never been denied by anyone who mattered to him. His voice, when it comes, is steady and final. "Dr. Ellison," he begins, "the board has made a decision regarding your position at Meridian National Bank." Every head turns toward him. The tension crystallizes, sharp and immovable. "We've decided to terminate your employment, effective immediately." The words drop like a gavel, each syllable cutting away at the thin veil of civility that had cloaked their intentions. Whitmore turns from the window, his pale eyes glinting with cold satisfaction. This institution was built on certain values, he continues. Family values, traditional values, values that have served us well for over 70 years. Beside him, Bradley Kent slides another folder across the polished table, the gesture slow and theatrical. Maya places her hand on it but does not open it immediately. She already knows what it contains. Your severance package is quite generous, Kent explains, his voice smug. 6 months of salary and a neutral reference, provided, of course, that you sign the non-disclosure agreement. Maya lifts the folder's cover. Neat pages of legal language stare back at her, dressed in the polite vocabulary of corporate procedure. But beneath the language lies the truth. Hush money. A golden gag meant to silence her, to buy her compliance, to erase every slight and every injustice she has endured here. The circumstances, she repeats softly, her voice as calm as the surface of a still lake. She raises her eyes to meet Whitmore's, her expression unreadable. Could you elaborate on what circumstances justify terminating a CEO who has delivered record profits and unprecedented customer satisfaction? Alan Pierce shifts in his seat, his discomfort obvious. It's not about numbers, Dr. Ellison, he says. It's about leadership style, cultural compatibility. The board feels your approach doesn't align with our institutional values. Whitmore returns to his chair with a sharp, irritated movement, leaning forward as if to end the discussion. Loyalty to tradition, respect for established practices, understanding that some methods of business have worked for generations and don't need to be modernized for the sake of political correctness. That is what matters here. The mask is slipping. The polite language of corporate governance is giving way to something uglier, more honest. And Maya sits perfectly still, documenting every word, not just with her pen, but with the recorder glowing red in her lap. Maya does not flinch beneath the weight of their verdict. Instead, she reaches into her purse with unhurried grace. One by one, she places her corporate credit card, her building access badge, and finally her company-issued laptop on the polished mahogany table. Each item lands with a soft, deliberate sound, as though she were moving chess pieces in a match only she can see the end of. The board members watch her in silence, expecting compliance. But her eyes are steady, and her voice carries an undertone that shifts the air in the room. I understand, she says, her tone almost gentle, though laced with something sharper beneath. Before I leave, I need to ensure that all proper protocols are followed. I assume you'll want a complete transition of my responsibilities and thorough documentation of all ongoing initiatives. Alan Pierce waves a dismissive hand, his voice bored, impatient. The board will handle the transition. We don't need, oh, but you do, Maya interrupts softly. Her smile is controlled, precise, a blade concealed in silk. Federal banking regulations require complete documentation of executive transitions. I'm sure you wouldn't want any regulatory complications. The temperature in the room seems to drop. Whitmore's eyes narrow, irritation sparking beneath his practiced composure. Bradley Kent leans back, trying to mask unease behind a thin smile. The words federal banking regulations carry a weight they cannot casually brush aside. Without another word, Maya reaches for her phone. Under the table, she taps out a brief text message. 2 words only. It's time. Then she places the phone down as if nothing had happened. Around her, the men shift uncomfortably, still clinging to the illusion of control. They believe they have already won. What they don't understand is that this moment, this supposed defeat, is only the opening move in a much larger battle. Edward Whitmore raises his hand in a casual but deliberate gesture toward the glass doors. Within seconds, they swing open and 2 security guards step inside. Both are white, both broad-shouldered, the kind of men whose presence is meant to intimidate before they ever say a word. Their expressions are blank, but their role is clear. Gentlemen, Whitmore says with a faint smile, his voice carrying just enough theater to remind everyone who commands the space. Please escort Dr. Ellison from the building and ensure she doesn't access any computers or files on her way out. The word escort lands heavy, loaded with implication. It casts her as a threat, a disruption, a problem to be removed rather than the institution's highest-ranking leader. It is a narrative she knows well, the powerful black woman reframed as a security risk. Maya rises slowly, her movements graceful, unhurried. She meets the guard's eyes without flinching. "That won't be necessary," she says calmly. "I intend to leave with dignity, but before I go, I do need to confirm the transition arrangements." Her gaze sweeps across the board before settling on Alan Pierce. "Tell me," she asks smoothly, "which of you will be assuming oversight of the Henderson Trust account during the transition?" The question slices through the room. Pierce frowns, caught off guard. "The Henderson account will be managed by our existing trust department," he replies, his tone too quick, too casual. Maya tilts her head slightly, her voice calm but carrying an edge of concern. "Interesting, because the Henderson Trust requires direct executive oversight. Mrs. Henderson made it very clear to me, any change in management structure triggers a complete portfolio review." The silence that follows is not the same silence of dismissal from before. This silence is uncertain, unsteady. The Henderson account represents $30 million in assets, a cornerstone of the bank's prestige and one of its most delicate trust structures. The men around the table know what a review would mean: disruption, questions, potential withdrawal. Maya lets the moment hang, her eyes calm, her tone precise. "I would hate to see such an important relationship unsettled by a hasty decision." The guards, still waiting by the door, glance at each other uncertainly. For the first time, the balance of authority in the room begins to shift. Maya allows the weight of the Henderson Trust to settle into the room before she speaks again. Her tone remains even, professional, as though she were simply reciting facts rather than dismantling the foundation beneath their authority. "Of course," she continues, "Henderson is not unique in their requirements. The Sethi Group, the Walker Family Trust, and the Rivera Foundation all have similar provisions written into their agreements. Each one stipulates direct executive oversight, and each of them has expressed to me personally how important consistency and leadership is to their continued relationship with Meridian." The effect is immediate. Bradley Kent's confident posture falters, his tan face paling just enough to betray what he feels. Alan Pierce, who only moments ago had spoken with false certainty, lowers his gaze to the papers in front of him, shuffling them without purpose. Even Whitmore's carefully cultivated calm begins to show cracks. His jaw tightens as he folds his hands together, too deliberately. Maya lets the silence bloom once more, the kind of silence that forces acknowledgement. She keeps her voice soft, but the precision of her words cuts sharper than any shout could. "Naturally," she says, "I would never interfere with the board's decisions. But I think we can all agree that sudden shifts in leadership, without proper communication, can damage client confidence." Her phone, lying face down on the table, vibrates softly with incoming messages. She does not need to look at them. She knows what they say. Word is moving quickly through the financial district, faster than they can contain it. One of the guards by the door shifts uneasily, his eyes flicking between Whitmore and Maya. For all their physical presence, even they seem unsure now who truly commands the room. The board had intended to end Maya's career with finality. Instead, in less than 5 minutes, she has turned their move into a liability that could cost them far more than her silence ever would. The glass doors open again, this time without Whitmore's signal. Olivia Park, head of human resources, steps into the boardroom. Usually composed and meticulous, today her expression is tight, her shoulders drawn with visible strain. She clutches a tablet against her chest, her knuckles white. "Mr. Whitmore," she begins, her voice steady but carrying a note of urgency, "I need to speak with you immediately about the proper procedures for executive transitions." The interruption visibly irritates Whitmore. His eyes flash as though she has trespassed on sacred ground. "Ms. Park," he says sharply, "this is a board matter. Please return to your office." But Olivia does not move. She steps closer to the table and places her tablet down. The screen lights up with a document stamped from outside Employment Counsel. "Sir, I've already been in contact with our legal advisors. They strongly recommend any termination of an executive officer, especially one at this level, be reviewed for compliance with federal employment law. Discrimination claims, wrongful termination exposure." Before she can finish, Bradley Kent snaps, his composure thinning. We don't need legal advice for a straightforward termination. Dr. Ellison's employment is at will. We can terminate her for any reason, or no reason at all. The words crash into the room with the force of a confession. For a moment, even the air seems to pause. Everyone knows what at will can mean in theory, but in this context, in front of the bank's first black woman CEO, after weeks of coded language and undermining, the phrase doesn't sound like policy. It sounds like prejudice spoken aloud. Olivia's eyes widen slightly, her professionalism straining against the alarm flickering in her gaze. She looks from Kent to Whitmore to Pierce, and then her eyes meet Maya's across the table. For just a second, the mask slips, and Maya sees it. Recognition, understanding, fear. Outside the glass walls, the cluster of employees grows. Phones are out now, cameras angled toward the spectacle inside. The moment is no longer confined to mahogany and carpet. It is escaping into hallways, into group chats, into feeds and hashtags. Maya picks up her pen again, her movements calm, her face unreadable. She writes a single line into her notebook. At will termination justification, Kent. The room is heavy with the echo of Kent's words, the phrase at will lingering like smoke after a fire. Olivia Park glances down at her tablet as though searching for a script, but there is none that can sanitize what has just been said. She clears her throat, her voice quieter now but firm enough to carry. The bank's policy, she reminds, strictly prohibits discrimination based on race, gender, age, or any other protected characteristic. All employment decisions must be based on legitimate business reasons and supported by documented evidence. Her words are careful, chosen like stones laid across a river, but they cannot soften what came before. Whitmore leans forward, his irritation barely contained. This termination is based entirely on performance and... He pauses as if choosing a safer phrase, but then lets the mask slip. On cultural fit. The words detonate in the room. Everyone present knows what they mean in this context. Cultural fit is no longer a benign phrase. It has become a euphemism so transparent that even Olivia cannot disguise her alarm. Cultural fit, she repeats, her voice edged with disbelief. Mr. Whitmore, those words carry very serious implications in employment law. They have been used repeatedly in discrimination cases. Whitmore cuts her off with a sharp gesture. Enough. This is a board decision. But it is already too late. Outside the glass walls, the employees clustered in the hallway are watching with growing intensity. Many of them are people Maya hired. Diverse, ambitious, hopeful when they walked into Meridian's doors, their faces pressed closer to the glass, their phones angled higher. Inside, Maya lowers her gaze to her notebook and writes with deliberate precision, cultural fit justification, Whitmore. She does not look up as she does it. She does not need to. She knows the recorder in her lap has captured every syllable. The atmosphere shifts. The board thinks they are simply reaffirming their authority, but what they are really doing is building the case against themselves. Brick by brick, word by word. The tension inside the boardroom leaks outward like water through cracked glass. Outside, the crowd of employees has grown thicker, their murmurs louder. The faint glow of phone screens reflects against the glass walls as more of them begin recording. The supposed privacy of this meeting has already dissolved into spectacle. Then a voice cuts through the muffled silence. Daniel Alvarez, one of the bank's rising stars in commercial lending, and a hire Maya personally championed, presses close to the glass. His words carry clearly into the room. Dr. Ellison, is it true they're terminating you? The question lands like a thunderclap. Every head turns inside and out. The board members stiffen, their control slipping under the weight of exposure. Within moments, others join Alvarez at the glass. Naomi Kim from the trust department, Robert Hayes from commercial real estate, and Dr. Layla Rahman from international banking. All high performers, all people of color, all understanding that if Maya can be discarded so easily, then none of them are truly safe. The silence inside cracks as Bradley Kent slams his palm on the table. His voice is sharp, laced with authority but straining with panic. This is not your concern, he snaps toward the glass. Return to your duties immediately or face disciplinary action. The threat hangs in the air, but instead of retreating, the employees outside remain where they are. Phones lifted higher now. Kent's face flushes, frustration boiling over. His next words are less controlled, more dangerous. Everyone needs to remember their place. The phrase slices through the room, and in an instant, the meaning is unmistakable. Spoken by a white male executive to a diverse group of employees defending their black woman CEO, the words reek of hierarchy, exclusion, and arrogance. Inside the boardroom, Olivia Park's face tightens with alarm. Outside, a collective gasp rises from the employees. The phrase is already echoing in their recordings, already spreading through group chats and social feeds. Maya does not move, does not speak. She simply lets the silence stretch while the weight of Kent's words does their damage. Every second that passes, the balance of power tilts further. The shock of Kent's words ripples outward like a seismic wave. Outside the boardroom, employees exchange wide-eyed glances, their phones alive with furious tapping. In seconds, clips are posted to Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram. Screens glow with captions, Meridian National Board removes first black woman CEO, and remember your place? Within minutes, the hashtag Meridian CEO trends locally. Retweets multiply, accompanied by outrage and disbelief. Some employees text family and friends. Others send the videos to journalists they know will amplify them. Through the tall windows of the 32nd floor, Maya sees movement on the street below. Vans with satellite dishes pull up to the curb, their logos unmistakable. Major news outlets. Reporters spill onto the sidewalk, cameras hoisted on shoulders, producers barking into headsets. The story is already too big to contain. Inside the boardroom, the atmosphere is fraying. Whitmore notices the vans and goes pale. He looks like a man watching his carefully constructed fortress catch fire from within. Bradley Kent, breathing hard, points a finger toward the crowd outside the glass. "This is a circus," he growls. "Security, clear that area immediately." The two guards exchange uncertain looks. Their hesitation is obvious. What were once instructions to control a single executive now seem to implicate dozens of innocent employees who are doing nothing more than watching and filming. Maya remains seated, her expression calm, her hands folded neatly in front of her. She doesn't need to intervene. She doesn't need to shout. The board is unraveling on its own, undone by arrogance and panic. She glances at her phone resting on the table. Notifications roll across the screen in rapid succession. Journalists tagging her name, allies messaging support, networks alerting her that the story is already on air. Whitmore's voice sharpens, brittle with desperation. "We can still control this." But even as he says it, the reality is obvious. Control has already slipped through their fingers, carried away by the speed of social media and the presence of hundreds of watching eyes. The air inside the boardroom is brittle, every breath sharp with the knowledge that their private decision has already gone public. Then at precisely the moment Maya expects, the soft chime of the executive elevator interrupts the chaos. The glass doors slide open, and Gabrielle Shaw, senior partner at Shaw, Turner and Associates, strides in with measured authority. Two associates follow behind her, arms laden with bankers' boxes and heavy briefcases. Their entrance is efficient, rehearsed, and devastatingly timed. Simultaneously, every phone around the table buzzes in unison. Whitmore, Kent, and Pierce all glance down. Their screens flash with the same subject line: Notice of Investigation, Securities and Exchange Commission. Copied to the Federal Reserve Bank of New York and the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency. Whitmore's face drains of color. He looks up just as Gabrielle sets her briefcase squarely on the table, clicking it open with precision. "Gentlemen," she announces, her voice crisp, her diction flawless, "I am here representing Dr. Ellison in what appears to be a discriminatory termination proceeding." The words hit the room like a hammer blow. Bradley Kent's hands tremble as he scrolls his inbox, muttering, This is premature. We haven't even finalized." "Oh, but you have," Gabrielle cuts in smoothly, her eyes glinting with restrained fire. From the case, she removes a compact digital recorder and places it on the table. Its red light blinks steadily, an unblinking witness. "We have 47 minutes of this meeting preserved in full. Every statement, every coded phrase, every threat." Alan Pierce's voice cracks. "This is entrapment. She can't record a private board meeting." Gabrielle smiles, the kind of smile that carries sharp edges. Actually, New York is a one-party consent state. Dr. Ellison was legally entitled to record any conversation she participated in. More importantly, as CEO, she was fulfilling her fiduciary duty to document potential misconduct by board members. The silence that follows is heavier than any that has come before. The recorder's red light blinks again, each pulse a reminder of their words already carved into digital stone. And for the first time since the meeting began, it is no longer Maya who is on trial. It is them. The blinking red light of the recorder seems louder than any voice in the room, a silent metronome counting down the unraveling of the board's authority. Pierce leans back, his face flushed, his voice rising with false bravado. This can't stand. She has no right to bring in recordings of private deliberations. This is privileged material. Gabrielle Shaw doesn't flinch. Instead, she lifts a sheet of paper from her briefcase and lays it gently on the table, her manicured finger pressing down on the heading. You're mistaken. New York law requires only one party's consent to record a conversation. Dr. Ellison was a direct participant. Therefore, every word spoken here is admissible as evidence. The board members exchange panicked looks, but Gabrielle isn't finished. She slides another document forward, this one embossed with the seal of the bank's own governance charter. Furthermore, as Chief Executive Officer, Dr. Ellison is bound by fiduciary duty. She is obligated to document any conduct by the board that could constitute a breach of trust, discrimination, or violations of federal banking regulations. Failing to do so could itself be considered negligence. The weight of her words crushes the room. Kent swallows hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. Pierce stares at the recorder, its small blinking light now transformed into an executioner's torch. Whitmore shifts in his seat, his carefully crafted calm now eroded, beads of sweat shining faintly at his temples. Maya sits motionless, her expression serene, hands folded in front of her as though this were nothing more than a routine quarterly review. The men around her are realizing too late that the evidence they thought would bury her has been turned into the rope that threatens to strangle their own careers. Outside the glass walls, the crowd of employees swells. Some are whispering, some recording, some pressing their phones directly to the glass for clearer footage. The optics are undeniable. A black woman CEO calm and composed, flanked by legal muscle, while the old guard fumbles and sweats. Gabrielle leans back, her voice calm but edged with steel. Every coded phrase, every mention of cultural fit, every suggestion that she seek a place more suitable for her kind, all of it is preserved, and all of it is now subject to federal review. The silence is suffocating, broken only by the hum of the city outside. The board has been outmaneuvered, and for the first time they know it. Gabrielle doesn't give them time to regroup. From the banker's box beside her, one of her associates withdraws a thick manila folder stamped with bold black letters, Ellison Capital Holdings, LLC. She opens it with the care of someone setting down a detonator. There's been, Gabrielle says, her voice deliberate, a fundamental misunderstanding about Dr. Ellison's relationship with this institution. She lifts the first document and spreads it across the polished mahogany table. Stock certificates, corporate filings, shareholder records, each one carrying weight far heavier than the men across from her want to believe. Dr. Ellison is not merely the chief executive officer of Meridian National Bank, Gabrielle announces. Through her family's investment vehicle, Ellison Capital, she is the largest individual shareholder, controlling 35% of this bank's equity. The words fall like an earthquake. Bradley Kent's skin blanches as if the blood has drained from his body. Alan Pierce gasps audibly, the sound small but piercing in the stillness. Edward Whitmore's face hardens, then freezes, like a man staring at a ghost. His hand trembles just enough to betray him when he tries to fold it neatly on the table. Gabrielle isn't finished. She withdraws another set of papers, laying them neatly beside the first. Furthermore, Dr. Ellison is the daughter of the late Judge Leonard Ellison, whose influence was instrumental in the founding of this institution. His estate continues to hold significant sway over the bank's charter and federal licensing. That influence is alive in these documents, in these filings, and in the very structure of this bank. The revelation strikes like a tidal wave, sweeping away every pretense of control the board had held on to. For months, they had dismissed her as an outsider, a face they could replace. Now the truth is undeniable. She doesn't just sit at the table, they sit at hers. Maya allows the silence to stretch, serene as still water. When she finally speaks, her tone is quiet, unshaken, but it carries the weight of inevitability. "Gentlemen," she says, her gaze steady, "I think it's time we had a different conversation about the future of Meridian National." The silence after Maya's words is suffocating. Whitmore stares at the stock certificates as if sheer willpower might make them vanish. Kent's lips move soundlessly, the beginning of an objection he cannot voice. Pierce sits stiff, his hands twisting the edge of his papers, until the corners crumple. Gabrielle breaks the stillness with a crisp motion. She pulls another document from her case, slides it across the table, and taps the header with a manicured nail. "This," she says, "is a memorandum from Hawthorne and Cole, LLP, dated 6 months ago. It advises the board explicitly that any personnel action concerning Dr. Ellison must be reviewed at the shareholder level due to her equity stake. It warns of exposure, legal risk, and reputational harm if you proceed otherwise." She lifts her gaze to meet each of theirs in turn. "It is stamped, received, and initialed by all three of you?" Kent's face darkens. Pierce swallows hard. Whitmore's jaw clenches, but he says nothing. Gabrielle continues, her tone sharpening. "And yet, despite this legal guidance, you not only ignored it, you engaged in coordinated discussions to minimize Dr. Ellison's influence." From a slim folder, she produces a tablet. With one tap, the boardroom's large screen flickers to life. Lines of text appear. Internal emails, subject lines. Casual correspondence that now glow with damning clarity. Phrases jump out like poison in neon ink. Uppity, not our kind of people. Overstepping boundaries. The color drains from Pierce's face. Kent's mouth falls open, his protest caught in his throat. Whitmore shifts uncomfortably, his carefully measured authority unraveling. Maya watches silently, her hands folded, her eyes calm but piercing. She doesn't need to speak. The words on the screen speak louder than she ever could. Gabrielle lets the silence build before she adds, "These emails demonstrate not only intent, but prejudice. They form a paper trail of deliberate discrimination, one that regulators, shareholders, and, if necessary, a jury will find impossible to ignore." The recorder on the table blinks red again, steady, unblinking, immortalizing every second of their unraveling. The boardroom door opens once more, this time not to employees or attorneys, but to federal authority. Two representatives from the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency step inside, badges clipped to their jackets. Behind them, a pair of staff from the Federal Reserve Bank of New York carry briefcases filled with investigative files. Their presence alone shifts the oxygen in the room. This is no longer a dispute contained by mahogany walls. Whitmore stiffens in his chair, color draining from his face. Kent grips the edge of the table so tightly his knuckles whiten. Pierce sinks lower, as though trying to disappear. One of the regulators speaks, his voice flat, professional, and merciless. "We're here to initiate a review of potential violations of federal banking regulations, equal employment law, and corporate governance. This review includes personal liability for any board members involved in discriminatory practices." The words drop like stone weights. Personal liability. The phrase they've all feared but never expected to hear inside their own boardroom. Bradley Kent fumbles for his phone, his voice cracking. "I need to call my attorney." Gabrielle's gaze is cool, her tone precise. "You'll need several attorneys. Employment law, banking regulation, securities compliance. And if the investigation uncovers deliberate violations, criminal defense." Alan Pierce exhales sharply, his chest rising and falling as if he's aged a decade in a single breath. His papers lie forgotten, his hands trembling faintly. Whitmore turns his eyes to the window, staring at the swelling crowd outside. Protest signs bob in the sea of faces. Justice for Dr. Ellison. End banking discrimination. His reflection in the glass looks smaller now, dwarfed by the scale of what he set in motion. The fortress he thought impenetrable has become a cage, and for the first time, Edward Whitmore knows he is trapped inside it. He turns back toward Maya, his voice hollow, defeated. "Dr. Ellison, what do you want?" All eyes in the room turn toward Maya. A moment ago, these men thought they could erase her with a signature and a severance check. Now, with regulators watching and cameras recording from the hall, they can only wait, caught in the silence of their own undoing. Maya rises slowly, her posture straight, her presence commanding without theatrics. She walks to the window, placing herself between the board and the panorama of New York's skyline. Below, the crowd has swelled into the hundreds, signs lifted high, voices chanting in unison. The sight reflects not just her personal fight, but the collective weight of a community long excluded. She turns back, her eyes steady, her tone calm, but carrying the resonance of conviction. "What I want," she says, "is what I've always wanted, a financial institution that serves all of its community with dignity, respect, and equality." Her words hang in the air, resonant, undeniable. The board shifts uneasily in their seats. For the first time, it is not her position that seems fragile. It is theirs. "The question," she continues, "is whether you will be part of that future or whether you will be remembered as obstacles to progress. Men who stood in the way of change until they were swept aside." Kent lowers his gaze. Pierce rubs his temples with shaking hands. Even Whitmore, the man who only an hour ago told her she didn't belong, cannot meet her eyes. The balance of power has shifted so completely that they no longer know where to sit, how to speak, or how to salvage their authority. Outside, chants grow louder. "Ellison! Ellison!" The glass walls transform the boardroom into a fishbowl, and everyone in the building can see who truly holds power now. Maya doesn't raise her voice. She doesn't need to. Authority flows not from volume, but from the clarity of truth spoken at the right moment. And this is her moment. 6 months have passed, and Meridian National Bank no longer resembles the fortress of exclusion it once was. The portraits of pale, unsmiling founders still hang in the boardroom, but they are no longer alone. Alongside them now are photographs of community milestones, ribbon cuttings for small businesses in once red-line neighborhoods, scholarship awards to first-generation college students, loan signing ceremonies with families who never thought homeownership possible. The boardroom itself has changed. Where once sat a wall of men who echoed each other's privilege, there is now diversity in both face and voice, leaders who reflect the city outside the bank's glass walls. The old guard is gone, their names etched not into legacy but into court records and regulatory case studies. Maya Ellison stands at a podium in the bank's auditorium, addressing the inaugural Community Impact Summit. The room is full: business owners, students, city officials, everyday customers. Their applause fills the space as she begins to speak, but she raises a hand gently, commanding attention with the same quiet authority that once unsettled the board. "Change," she says, her voice steady, "is never comfortable for those who benefit from the status quo. But it is essential for any institution that wants to remain relevant in a world that refuses to stand still." Behind her, a screen projects statistics that silence any remaining doubters. A 400% increase in loans to minority-owned businesses, a 250% increase in first-time homebuyer mortgages in underserved neighborhoods. Customer satisfaction ratings leading the region, a 60% increase in profits. The highest employee retention rate in the bank's history. These results, Maya continues, are not about political correctness. They are about sound business practices, about recognizing talent and opportunity wherever they exist. In the audience sit familiar faces. Daniel Alvarez, now Vice President of Community Development, beams with quiet pride. Naomi Kim has been promoted to Senior Trust Officer. Dr. Layla Rahman leads the International Division. Those who stood with Maya during her darkest hour now shape the institution's brightest future. But Maya does not linger on their triumphs alone. She leans into the microphone, her eyes scanning the audience. "The most important lesson is this: dignity is not negotiable. Respect is not earned by compliance or silence. Every person who walks through these doors deserves the full measure of human dignity." The room is silent now, every ear hanging on her words. She pauses, then continues. "You belong wherever your talents and your dedication can take you. The question is not whether you are worthy of opportunity. The question is whether institutions are worthy of your contribution." Thunderous applause follows, rising to the rafters, but Maya's gaze is already turning forward. Meridian has committed $50 million to community development, education, and entrepreneurship. Federal regulators, spurred by her case, now require diversity at the board level across the industry. Other banks are revising policies, adopting oversight measures, fearing the cost of the next Ellison-style reckoning. Later, back in her office, Maya glances at the items on her desk. Framed articles praise her leadership. Letters of thanks from families and entrepreneurs line the shelves. But the piece she treasures most is a handwritten note from a young Black woman, freshly graduated in finance. Dr. Ellison, because of your courage, I know I don't need to ask permission to belong. I already do. Maya smiles softly. What began as an attempt to erase her has instead become a blueprint for systemic change. Her personal victory has been transformed into a collective one, ensuring that the doors she fought to keep open will never be shut again. The revolution did not end in that boardroom. It began there, and it continues, one voice, one decision, one demand for dignity at a time.